Very recently, HiRezAjax released a God Balance Progress Report about Arachne. This report is quite interesting in some regards. It gives us a little more insight into the balancing progress as usual, and it gives us some points to talk about. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here today. I am known as a critical figure, and I will go about this relatively critically. I do think that there's some, well, logic behind the thought process that's being put on Arachne here, or her balance more specifically, but there are quite a few things I disagree on, and I will say that in advance. So we'll dive into this and look at what numbers we have and what information we have and what we can do with that. Ajax opens by explaining how Arachne was originally with a completely different kit and was later redesigned in Season 1. For those of you who don't remember, her original kit had an ultimate on a relatively short cooldown of around 30 seconds. That is now basically Sylvanas' pull, but it was a lot faster. She could spawn multiple small eggs that would then spawn the spiders and stuff like that. It was relatively different from her kit now. I liked it, I thought it was interesting, but I can definitely tell you that it was worth reworking because really it was very gimmicky but without any actual viability. The only time that you would see it being used effectively was in Assault to pull the enemy into your team. Ajax then explains how her first major change since was in patch 3.12, where her web was changed from a ground target to a projectile. Throughout the report, Ajax shows stats for Arachne across different patches. I only picked out a few ones that I think are mostly worth talking about because the other ones kind of repeat the same picture. The first one is in patch 3.10. In this patch, she has the 9th highest win rate in casual conquest, the 10th place in ranked conquest. She was number 61 out of 77 gods played in casual and 68 out of 76 gods played in ranked conquest. So in a nutshell, she was barely played, but when she played, she was decent. Ajax's interpretation is a little different here. As a top 10 goddess in both casual and ranked, she was already quite powerful before the change to her web ability. Usually, when we see stats like this, it is because some sort of fields or quality of life issue. We want to draw more attention to her and improve the experience of playing as or against her, all while leaving her balance at a relatively same spot. The web also had awkward controls for the Arachne player, as it was a very small and thin deployable. We felt great about the new projectile from both perspectives. There was more visual information and more positive skill shot feelings. Now that I can agree with. I think the old web was nice and in some regards it was beneficial because it can't be blocked, which, you know, can be very good if you have a target that's being chased and there are minions between you and you just want to get that web behind them. That works better, but overall I feel like the new web has just a higher chance of being hit. It's a little easier for especially beginners, and the trail, the movement trail that comes with it is beneficial, so I do think that it was overall a good change here. What I don't agree with is that this is all that really factors in for her in terms of quality of life and feels. I don't think the reason that Arachne is not being played is purely down to feels and quality of life. And I don't believe that the stats that we have for her show that she is quite powerful. There are barely any gods that have been played less than her at that point, especially in ranked. And yes, she has been performing well when she was played, but that is because only players that are really good at the god will pick up a god when it is on a low play rate, and then they will usually perform well because everyone else kinda has given up on that god. Sure, some guy with 4,000 hours on Arachne will probably do better on that god than somebody with 20 hours on Thor if they're in the same match, and that can easily skew Arachne stats in their favor, whereas somebody who doesn't play Arachne would probably perform pretty badly with her, but people who don't play Arachne, so they don't go into the stats. And when a god is such a niche character and has that very dominant performance but only by a few players, it's a very strong indication that the god isn't actually that powerful, but only that some players have really mastered the god. I will come back to this theme throughout the discussion here quite often. I would just like to throw this out as one example. At the moment we have a Willish in a relatively bad state. She's not being picked much. In competitive we saw a few times, but really not much. She has some very bad matchups, especially since Artio came into the meta, And there is lots of reasons to believe that she's not doing so well. HiRez changed her, and I would say that the changes were for the worse, and now she's barely played still. If I was to play a Willish today, I would probably get over 50% win rate throughout my games. I would probably have pretty good stats on that god regardless. And that is because I have played a ton of a Willish. I am just good at that god at this point because I play her so much. That's not bragging, that's just pure logic. I have a lot more experience than the actual average player at that god, so yeah, I will be better. Does that mean that a Willish would need a nerf based on my stats? Hell no. Quite the opposite. I would still say that a Willish definitely needs buffs at the moment. It is just down to the fact that I would have a lot more experience than the enemies would have at their gods, that I would perform above average. Not perfect, I wouldn't win every game, especially since the god is not that good. But if only a few select experts play a god, then the win rate will be naturally higher than, for example, a top tier god that everyone picks, including people that are not good at the god, because somebody has to lose in the game. The next stats worth looking at are the ones from 3.21, and these are very interesting because in this one, Arachne actually takes the first slot in win rate in Casual Conquest, 7th slot in Ranked Conquest. Also, she is 29 out of 82 gods played in Casual Conquest and 52 out of 81 in Ranked. I was wondering why that was, and I found a few pointers. A, she got the Tumblr skin in 3.20, so definitely a reason for people to play again, and also a reason for people who play Arachne a lot to come back to the game and play a little bit, or people who just play her a lot to pick her up again after having a bit of a break from her. Just experienced players having a new reason to play the god. Also, there was a Heartseeker buff in the patch that greatly did benefit Arachne because it gave attack speed on Heartseeker as well, which was really good for her. And Stonecutting Sword, which was also frequently built on her, was buffed in the same patch. So yeah, she's performing a lot better, but there are also a lot of changes that favor that, and there are changes that, well, push it so that people will play her more. Nevertheless, first place is impressive, but it also didn't last. Also, Ajax points out here that when he talks about Ranked Conquest, it's only about Platinum level or higher. The question is, who is in Platinum here? The Arachne player or everyone? A lot of matches will have at least some gold players, some silver players, even if they're mainly in plat, and not every plat player is necessarily a good player either. If we're talking about diamond, then okay, I would agree, you kinda usually have to be pretty good to get there or grind a lot, but, you know, plat you can kinda randomly get into if you're lucky. And also, if you have the plat player on Arachne against gold players, farming them with a snowbally god like Arachne, that's kinda not the point. The stats from patch 4.6 paint a very dramatic picture here, which is for some reason strangely ignored by Ajax. In this very patch, Arachne was 40 out of 85 gods in win percent ranked in Conquest. She was in place 40. She was also 80 out of 85 gods played in ranked Conquest. She was the 5th last god on the list. She was almost not played at all, and still she only made the middle of the list in terms of performance. That means that almost only very skilled Arachne players picked her up, as it is the case for ranked in general. You pick up your better gods, and especially when a god is picked such few times, you can expect the players who pick her to be really good, and she still ended up only being like middle of the list, when you expect people to have a much higher win rate on a god that is usually, you know, only picked by experts, as said before. Ajax then states, her casual stats are clearly strong, which might support this, but we also see her putting up large numbers in ranked from time to time, so there must be value to her as a god, and I absolutely don't see that in these particular stats from this patch. Now this could be cherry picking, same as in this other patch we have this very high win rate, but we don't even know which stats Ajax is showing us here, and if he's maybe leaving out some patches that would be very relevant. But if exactly this one is worth showing, then to me that highlights very much that there is an issue. Then the next statement is, the next big shift in items and meta happened in the mid-season 4 patch. The removal of Hasten Fatalis could definitely cause some shift for this goddess. Now I'm wondering who actually built Hasten Fatalis on Arachne. I don't see that very often, to be honest, because usually there are other effects that are valued higher. We see Haste Katana being built on her now, but that's because this item is actually more beneficial for her than Hasten Fatalis ever was. So I'm not quite sure why that's factored in for the shifts, unless this is pointing at the fact that Hasten Katana caused the shift. Her win rate kinda again around the same stats we originally had, 9 out of 90 in casual, 25 out of 89 in ranked, and barely played in either. And again, 25 isn't that great when you are 86 out of 89 in ranked conquest in terms of pick rate. Ajax states that after that shift, Arachne continues to have a very low popularity and very high win rate. I wouldn't call that very high anymore. The options that are pointed out are 3. Buff her even though she's already strong, small buffs and then see where she ends up. Redesign her. Or number 3, leave her alone. Some gods are just unique and likely won't ever be widespread popular. The god can clearly perform well at most skill levels, so this is a reasonable option. For the time being, we've decided to leave her alone. Basically, go with that option. And I don't agree with that. I really don't agree with that. The reasoning here is gods that can perform well in casual modes create a positive experience for most of the player base, and not every god needs to be pro-viable. Forcing that would be very dangerous, results on 99% of the community. We do not prioritize buffing gods just for the SPL, especially if they already perform well in casual conquest, ranked conquest and other modes. Instead, god balance is focused around skilled ranked players plat and up, and we constantly cross-reference that with casuals to look for any outliers. Community reaction and feedback is important to the process, so is the development time. Redesigns are very costly and have large risks. And here's where I gotta scratch my head. Have you seen the community feedback that even this post has gotten? Have you seen the community feedback that Arachne has gotten before? People are not happy with her state. Even people that play a lot are not happy with her state. There is something about Arachne that people just dislike. And I am pretty certain it's especially in the fact that her clear in jungle, compared to others, is just absolutely horrendous, and that she's completely single target focused, that her CC and lockdown is conditional and much harder to execute than that of others, because you have to land the basics first and then have to hit them all on a target, whereas other guards just get a free stun right off the bat, even though you get an attack speed in the turn. But really, there are so many glaring issues about how Arachne does not work in most metas, and when she performs, it's pub stomping. She gets ahead early, she snowballs across the enemy team, and she gets her AAs and heals up so high so early that you can't do anything. And that's not fun to play against either. If you ever try to counter a snowballing Arachne, it's almost impossible. It's kind of Anubis level playstyle where it's just not fun. They have to be either terribly ahead or terribly behind, and then game is done in one way or the other. And I don't think that's the way to go. That's just my take on it. I think we could do a lot for Arachne through cleaves on her too for the jungle clear, other means of maybe taking away some of her self-heal in order to make up for that, but I don't think she has to be forever out of competitive, and I don't think she has to forever be this kind of unpicked god similar to, say, Bakasura. I wish for some AA assassins to just, you know, be nice in the meta. And that concludes my opinion. Thank you very much for watching. If you're not subscribed yet, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell. It really helps me out. And it also gives you the chance to find codes in either the description or the comments that you can then redeem in-game. See you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.